How to get a job in a declining market. Welcome to Mark and Pete. Jobs are disappearing, AI is advancing, and apparently we all need retraining by Tuesday. Yes, welcome to Mark and Pete. We're two blokes with half an opinion. Now, here's our first thought.
If you are extremely tired of not being hired, where your skills are seemingly never required, just state on your CV you're an AI agent admired. That might get the employer really inspired. Yes.
I do.
Well, it is true that the declining economy that we're seeing in the United Kingdom is causing many problems for people to simply find a job. Most notably, Reed, the recruitment firm, has stated that graduate vacancies on his website have fallen from around 180,000 3 or 4 years ago down to 50,000. This is a remarkable trend. So, what needs to be done about it? We have some tips on the Mark and Pete show here. So, Mr. Pete, first of all, what say you about the job situation in the United Kingdom? And more importantly, what does this mean for a generation that is just simply trying to start their careers?
Well, the jobs market is really changing, isn't it? I mean, there are new jobs on the horizon that weren't around years ago. There's a disappearance, sadly, of some older jobs, sort of artisan and craft-based jobs, um, and there is a market change in the way that people map out their career, and that people often change careers at least once, maybe twice during, or more than that, during their lifetime. So that's what's happening with the jobs market in the UK. So companies such as Reed, which are jobs agencies, they're one of the winners in this situation.
Well, I agree. Now, we're going to come on to some of the tips here. So, some of this has been recommended by Reed. Some of this is recommended by Mark and Pete.
Yes.
Now, it may be obvious to some of our listeners that we've been in industry and in society perhaps longer than most. And so, we're giving you perhaps some of the insights and benefits of what we've seen. I'm going to start with what Mr. Pete's sort of highlighted, which is traditionally, many people have been educated at school. And what has happened is they've learned many different subjects. They've then gone into industry following a particular path. And that has been the journey where effectively you build your career in a given profession and you see that through for 40 years and hopefully at some point you get your pension. Well, let's rethink that. And the reason is this, is that many jobs do not remain the same. What we've seen in the last 10 to 20 years is jobs coming and going or evolving. So, what it means for those who are in education today, what they have to be prepared to think about is, first of all, get the core skills in place. You may be pursuing a particular area of a career, maybe a profession. You might want to go into teaching, you might want to go into engineering, you might want to go to become an artist. It doesn't really matter what you choose. But what you might have to recognize is that you may have to adapt. If you started off as a teacher, you may end up being a researcher. You may end
Yeah.
up going from research into something else. The point being is, don't always assume that your profession is going to be the same. Now, that may have been different, obviously, for your parents or your grandparents who did see one career, and they may have even stayed with one particular company. And that's the other thing to note. You need to think about this, is that you may actually need to recognize that you could end up being more fluid and flexible in your career, where you might actually work for dozens of people over the course of a 40 years. Don't think that that's now a bad thing. So I can tell you that when you have gone through this yourself, and I've been through this myself, you will recognize that it's not a bad thing that you've had to adapt. Now, the other thing as well, let's come on to something that we did allude to, which is about AI. Now, artificial intelligence is something that's not going to go away. Let's first of all try and level set. It is true that artificial intelligence is actually removing some jobs. They tend to typically be manual, repetitive jobs. If you are data processing and you're just always scanning, say materials, or if you're doing something which is repetitive, AI can often take that over. But what you could do is you might start to recognize if you've got more creative skills or analytical skills, or possibly skills where, yes, you may have coding skills, etc., if you're going to go down the technical route. But even if you don't go down the technical route, what employers are looking to do is for you to see how you use AI to in turn be able to solve problems. So think of AI not as being your competitor. Think of it as your something that augments you, actually does something to help you. Now, this is where I think that employers are looking at your CV or resume. Now, what they're looking at is to try and see whether you've got the core skills and experience. Now, we'll come on to the experience bit in a moment, but we're focusing on the skills. The skills are the things, if you've got mathematical skills, that's going to be good. If you've got creative skills, whether it be creative writing or artistic skills, that's something, again, which is important, because what employers are looking for is people who can adapt. They've got the foundational skills, but they can actually then apply themselves going forward. Now, the other thing as well, which is about experience. Now, what often job hunters are looking at is a given role. They see a role, but what often can happen is, ironically, AI can screen you out. Because if you haven't put the right keywords or if you haven't put the right phrases, you may ironically still be a good candidate, but sometimes the process can actually knock you out. So what you have to do is very much look very carefully at what the job description is and not necessarily invent something. So we definitely want to make this really clear. Do not lie. Do not cheat. Do not put something which you can't substantiate. But what you can do is you can take your skills and make sure that the phraseology is in the language which the employer is looking for. And the reason being is taxonomy or glossary or however you want to describe it can often be different for different people, especially if you're applying for jobs in different countries. So, for example, if you're applying for a job in the United Kingdom, the language may be different in the United States simply because, that's the way the culture is and the way the language is. But they could be talking about the same thing. So make sure you get the right language in there, and even the spelling. Because what you need to do is try and come through as being authentic. Don't let AI just simply do your job for you. Make sure that AI is helping you. So you can actually use your CV through AI, and there are many different tools that are out there. We don't have to mention them all at the moment, but there are many wonderful tools that can help you there with your application. But make sure it's authentic, because when you get into the interview, you have to be able to substantiate it and you have to be able to talk it through. Now we come on to experience. Now, there are many people who are probably 18, 19, 20, and so on. They've gone through university. Yes, we know you've got lots of debt, but here's the key. What do you need to do? Now, some people would say, even if you had a paper round, even if you worked at a local store, get that into your CV, because what you need to show is that you have been proactive. If you can show that you've done some research for somebody, or even maybe you did some voluntary work at a charity store, it doesn't matter. That's fine. Put it into your CV, because it will show that you've done something in the community or you've added value somewhere. Now, I think that the other thing as well is try and think of it from the point of view of the employer. Often employees, what they do is they talk about the me. What you need to do is talk about the you, what you can do for the employer. Now, one of the things that Reed often talks about is about not necessarily throwing the ball back into the employer's court, but at some point, the person you're talking to would have been given an opportunity. They would have been given an opportunity to get into their career. So the point being is what you're looking for is for somebody to give you that opportunity to be able to share those skills, that creativity, to show that you're adaptable and flexible, and try and have a conversation with them so that you are a human being. Some people may say it can often be a very prescriptive, almost black and white process. Maybe in the early part of the phase it can be, but ultimately what people do, in my opinion, is they buy into people. And that's the key. If you can show that you're somebody who is really flexible, willing to learn, willing in some cases to make mistakes and acknowledge them, but critically that you are somebody who are easy to work with. If you can get over that barrier, then that will give you an inroad. So, Mr. Pete, well, I'll stop at this point and
Yes.
ask, from your
Ooh.
experience, you've applied for different jobs and over your career, what have you found as being some of the most challenging areas, or more importantly, where you've seen opportunities?
Well, it's interesting that the jobs agencies have developed their techniques over the years. So, talking about skills, they've developed their skills such that the old way, I know many still use this, of just putting an advert out there, an interview, and then asking for references, is replaced by a more sophisticated selection procedure with online video interviews before the actual interview to screen you out to see whether you're appropriate. A recent job that I applied for part time. I know obviously we earn mega bucks here at the podcasting headquarters of Mark and Pete, but I just need a little bit of extra pin money, and I was looking for a job and managed to get through to the selection process using these methods. Online screening, which uses AI in order to, I think you referred to that earlier, of using AI to screen CVs, but this was screening the person,
Yeah.
speaking into a video camera. So I think this is what I've observed changing. This is what's changed is that now it isn't always dependent on previous performance. So it's like you're given a new chance. You've got an opportunity to prove yourself. You've got an opportunity to step up your game because references aren't as important as they used to be. So that's my key takeaway. The other thing is to say that although things have moved on, jobs have moved on, there are certain skills that are dropping out. That means if you have one of the old professional skills, in carpentry, certain types of plumbing and the older types of plumbing and this sort of thing, you're actually in. You've got a skill that's rare, so that's a good thing. So
Yeah.
I would say don't think that you're out of the market because you're older, of the jobs market, and if because maybe you think you might get a bad reference from your employer, don't worry about that. There's plenty of in companies that now use this new screening process rather than placing such a reliance on references.
Well, indeed. Now, here's the other thing, and I think I'll just sort of close out one of the things you said, because I think it's really important around the video engagement. It's not something that, people 10, 20, 30 years ago would have probably experienced, but it is a very much an opportunity for somebody to come across and showcase their personality and, the type of individual they are. And of course, obviously, you have the opportunity to use those tools. And certainly for those, I would also advise, whether you're young, whether you're towards the end of your career, definitely get familiar with the social tools. It doesn't have to necessarily be video, it can be many other things, but just be aware of what's around them, because that's what employers typically do. They will be using video, they will be using Teams, they will be using social media tools and platforms. So you need to sort of think about that. So
Yes.
here's another thing as well, which is about research, because I think research is really important. If you're applying for a job, most employers will be asking you, why us? And I
Yes.
think it's really crucial that you do the research on the company. You're not going to know everything, but most companies will either put out financial reports, they'll put out profiles of their company. Definitely, they will have profiles of their executives. So the more that you learn about the company, the more you can hopefully yourself decide that actually, this is the right type of company for you. But because when you get into that interview at some point, that question is going to come up. So don't, get flummoxed by saying I didn't research, because that won't go well. You need to know what the
Yeah.
company is about and what they do.
Yes, and just bringing in a different aspect of this. So one thing that I've noticed is that there tends to be a reticence in churches of praying for people to get a job. Not in all churches, certainly in the Pentecostal movement, this is more common. But God is the God of every aspect of your life, and in fact, this is a quote from Exodus 31:3, and I filled him with the Spirit of God in wisdom, in understanding, and in knowledge, and in all manner of workmanship. This was the idea that God, through his Holy Spirit, gives skills and abilities in order to be able to do a job. And that God is concerned with that. So in terms of the prayer of churches, not just of individuals, praying as an employer to get the right employee, and as someone who's looking for a job to be able to get to the right job, is something that you should be praying about as a church. And also praying for developing the right skills. In church, it's often the case that you'll pray for the right gifts and abilities to serve in the church. But it shouldn't just be that. It should be for the entirety of your life, including your employment prospects.
No, indeed. Now, here's a couple of other tips as well, which just sort of closing out. Now, many people at the earlier part of their careers would come away with either O levels, A levels, and a degree, possibly. Let's take the academic route. For those who are coming with their academic qualifications, absolutely, at that point, it's very much key, along with some of the other things we said. But remember, if you're further into your career, maybe, the O levels and A levels are not so relevant now. But what is important is certification. There are many on the job training schemes that can happen. I would always advise take them up, because if your employer is prepared to pay you to go through a course, it's good, because it also shows you're keeping your skills up to date. If you're in your mid 30s, 40s, 50s, and even in your 60s, people aren't going to be looking back at your O levels. They're going to be looking about what skills you've done in recent times and what have you achieved in your career. And I would very much put the point is that when you're doing your curriculum vitae or resume, don't put it as much onto a job description. Yes, by all means, put some duties. Put your efforts on what you've achieved. It's the achievement part that's key, because that's the bit which shows where you can differentiate, you can add value to a project, etc. But only put it the ones where you have made the difference. But woven into that somewhere, there may be things that you worked on where, for example, you had certification because you maybe went through an artificial intelligence course, and in which case you then applied it to a job or a project. And in which case, that's fantastic, because that's the sort of thing you can showcase. I would always advise, don't be too concerned about, what happened in the past. It's about what's happening now. And of course, the other thing is what you want to do. Explain where you want to take your career. Why, not just are you applying for this job, but what are the other things, what are the aspirations that you have? Because employers will look at individuals of all ages, depending on how enthusiastic they are. And if they can see that that employee is enthusiastic, then there's more chance of getting through the process. So Mr. Pete, these are a few tips. There are many others. But what I would say is it's a two-way process. If you are an employer, obviously you're looking for the right candidate. But if you are an employee or a potential, this is really your chance to shine. Any other thoughts from you in terms of guidance on how to get a job?
Well, it's simply this, that there are jobs out there. If you're looking for employment, be patient. The right job will come up. And so, having said that, that means be selective. Don't put the proper value on yourself and your skills and abilities. Don't take the first job that comes along just because there's an offer. Make your decision based on what's right for you. Interviewing and selection is a two-way process.